Ladies and gentlemen, we would ask that you kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices or place them on silent. Today, we will begin our services with military honors. Thank you.
Detail attention. Post.
of appreciation for putting up in time and faithful service. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We begin our service today in memory of Dr. Eugene Cohen with the familiar words of the 23rd Psalm. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, benot deshe yarbitzeni, omei menuchoti nahaleni, nafshi yishovei v'yancheni v'magalei tzedek l'man shemo. Gam ki elech b'geit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi, shivtecha mishantecha, hema yenachamuni, ta'arok lefanai shulchan neged zorarai, Ishanta v'shem roshi kosi rivaya akto v'chesed, yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai, l'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. God guides me on paths of righteousness. He revives my soul for the sake of God's glory. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod do comfort me. You set a table in the sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. With each passing hour, we come to understand how fragile this life truly is. With each passing day, we consider how blessed we really are. We stand in awe of God's love, which allows us to grow, and we wonder what we have done to deserve such graciousness. But in the end, our lives are like a passing breath. And all that will remain is the shadow of where we once stood. So we pray, dear God, teach us to number our days. Give us the wisdom to understand and realize what truly matters most. Help us to remember, as we remember Gene, that integrity and honor are eternal. The decisions that we make today will shape the memories of us in the future. When we have difficult decisions to make, we call upon those who shaped our lives. When we need love and support, they will always be with us. For as long as we shall live, they will live too, for they are forever a part of us as we remember them. The mysteries of life and death are beyond human understanding. We are pained when anguish befalls those whom we love. In sorrow confronted by death, which has taken Eugene Cohen from our midst, we feel our frailty. We know that from God's perspective, all of us flourish for but a day. We pray, dear God, Shepherd of Israel, guide your flock with love and compassion. Grant solace to those who mourn. May their lives together help to sustain them and add to the blessing which is theirs in the memory of their beloved. In that valley of the shadow of death, and beside still waters, in green pastures, you, O Lord, are our shepherd. Be our strength and our shield, our stay, and our comfort throughout all our days. And together we say, good people, it is with heavy hearts that we come together today. The Shabbos is about to begin, the time when we believe that God is close to us and hears our prayers, that we come to remember and to pray for the soul of Eugene Cohen, the patriarch of this family. Shabbos is a day of rest, and we know that your father in love, your husband, your granddad, is indeed at peace. Israel has always been an important part of your lives, and it was especially of Gene's. Not only did you and Giselle visit Israel several times together, but Gene also served the Jewish state in its time of need. So it seems only fitting that I start these words of tribute in a place that was near and dear to him. As you know, in Israel there are two great seas. One is in the north and one in the south. The one in the north is called the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. What makes the Kinneret so special is that many rivers go into it, but for every drop of water that comes in, a sweeter drop of water passes down through the Jordan River. So people come to swim and to boat, even drink from the Sea of Galilee. Further down the Jordan, there is another sea, and no one drinks its water, because every drop that enters it stays there. It takes everything in, it gives nothing back, and that's why it's called the Dead Sea. Well, Gene was like the Kinneret, always giving, a source of light and life and goodness in the world. And like that Kinneret, people gravitated to him. They enjoyed his company, the gift of his supportive spirit. Your father gave away far more than he ever took from this world. And he was truly happiest when he was making other people happy. So today we come together to recall the blessings of his generous spirit and all that he shared with all of you each and every day. Family was everything to Gene. He made a great one, and he came from a great one. In his early years, his family did not have much monetarily, but they had a whole lot of love and a tireless devotion to one another. His parents, Isidore and Riva, came from the Ukraine, but not together. His dad came over first. His mom and two older sisters made their way to this country after an arduous journey some 10 years later. Gene had two older sisters, Frances and Frida, who were quite a bit older than him and were kind of like parents to him as well. And I know that some of their families are here with us today, and I hope the memory of all that you shared, especially Fred, who was like Gene's younger brother, I hope that all of you were comforted by the memories of all that you shared over the years. As I said, growing up, Gene did not have a lot. He remembers growing up quite poor, putting newspapers in his shoes, jumping on the back of the trolley to get from place to place. His ticket out of the neighborhood was to join the Navy at the age of 16. And he was honored to serve our country. I'm sure he is honored to know that other sailors paid tribute to his memory at the beginning of the service. He was very patriotic, and the Navy did well by having him, and he did well by being in the Navy, because there was a commanding officer who encouraged him to keep on learning, to go back and get his GED, do the GI Bill, to finish high school, and maybe go on after that. Well, not only did he go on past high school and college, he went to medical school and became a physician. That was a decision that would shape the rest of his life, because being a doctor was your dad's true calling. He was that old-fashioned kind of doctor who took tremendous personal interest in every one of his patients. And as a result, Simon and Nirvana, you knew that Dr. Cohen would always be busy, no matter what. He couldn't sit still. Your dad worked very, very hard indeed, and yet he was always there for the two of you. He was dedicated to helping you grow as individuals, helping to open up the doors, the pathways that would lead you to success in life. He made sure that you both got the finest of education, encouraged you to take chances, to try new things, to spread your wings and fly. And he was so proud of you and the lives you live, dedicated to the ideals and the values that your dad instilled in both of you. Your father was part of your life every day and every stage of your lives together. He was a great listener, not just to the words you said, but he could hear the language of your heart. He knew you so well. He was genuine, he was forthright and honest, and as a result, you knew the inner workings of his heart too. You saw that, you felt that, and his guidance is with you to this day. Your father was intensely proud of both of you. In time, his heart was filled with joy as each of you found the perfect life partner. And then that both of you, Jonathan and Kevin, looked up to Gene like a second father. He made it so easy to come into the family. He was so easy to speak to. And you knew that he only had your best interests at heart. The love that you shared with your father-in-law was genuine and deep. And of course, the four of you gave him the great joy of grandchildren. And each of you, Sierra and Ellie and Aaron, as well as Olivia, William, and Hannah, you'll all have a treasure chest of memories of all that you shared with your granddad. He wasn't the kind of granddad to get on the floor and play with you when you were little, but that doesn't mean he wasn't intensely involved in your lives. Whatever you were into, he was into. And whenever he could be there, there he was. All you needed to say was this was something important to you, and it was automatically important to your granddad. He kind of spoiled you. In fact, anything that you ever expressed an interest, you knew he would go and get it for you. He was into whatever you were, and he was happy when you were happy. Your joy was his. And you really could not have a better role model in life than your granddad. His laid-back approach meant that you could talk to him about anything and know that if something was troubling you, it would be made better by speaking with him. Every moment you spent with your granddad was precious. And Gene was even able to see his granddaughter get married. As Shira, you and Brian were wed, I remember that joyous day beside the Cooper River when we celebrated the gift of life and love together. And even though he never got to physically hold his great-grandson, Ethan, FaceTime connected them. And no matter what Gene's day was like, when he saw Ethan smile, he lit up. That was a great gift to him, especially in recent days. As I get older in life, I continually develop my interest in longevity. What is it that makes people live lives past 90 years old? And Gene lived a long and good life, and I think, and I suspect, Sima and Ravana, you know, that a large part of your father's longevity was due to the fact that his heart was forever intertwined with yours, Giselle. It might have been a random coincidence that you both happened to like opera and brought the two of you together, but once you met, you knew you had found someone very special, warm, generous, kind, caring. The connection between the two of you was so deep. You were endlessly fascinated by one another, and you enjoyed all that life had to offer. You got to travel the world and experience a life that few people could even dream of. That's what you had. I guess in part because neither of you was one to sit around. And so, played tennis, took scuba diving lessons, and had an endless array of activities personal and professional. I had the privilege over the years, I've known this family a long time, to see the two of you as a couple. And it was clear to me, Giselle, that not only did you bring happiness, but you brought out the best in Gene Cohen like he did in you. What the two of you shared, what you found together, is what sustained him, nourished him, and enriched both of your lives. Gene may have retired a long time ago, but he kept as active as ever. In fact, in certain ways, even more so. And I suspect that contributed to his longevity as well. But he did it because he had an active partner right by his side, encouraging him every step of the way. I know that the recent days for all of you have been quite challenging. And even though Gene continued to be vibrant past his 90th birthday, eventually age did begin to show and slow him down. And yet his spirit remained strong. And part of that is simply because that was his constitution, that was who he was. But it was also in large measure due to the love and the support that all of you showed him. And I know that for all of you it was just an honor to be able to repay to him a modicum of the kindness that he always showered on each of you. He taught you the meaning of selfless love, of truly giving yourself to one another. And that will continue to shape your lives forever. Fate has taken him from our midst, but nothing will ever take him from your hearts. He has made an indelible impression, and moreover has shaped you into the people you are today. He has helped this family to grow, but moreover to be there for one another. And I know that you will all continue to spend the rest of your lives making him proud. And so we pray to Hey Nishmato, Tzur B'Tzur Chaim, that the soul of Yoel be bound in the bond of eternal life, and that his memory continue to be a blessing for all of you. Yoel ben Yitzchak HaKohen, Zichrono Livracha. We'll have the honor today of hearing from family members, from Sima and Ravana, from Aaron, and finally from you, Giselle. We'll call on you first, Sima.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to start by actually thanking you, Rabbi Krupnik, for your always beautiful, eloquent words that really capture the spirit of the individual and the occasion. Yeah, I cannot say anything other than to consider myself extremely lucky to have had my father for 90 years in almost excellent health. 90 of his 93, and while the last few years have been tough, I'd like to think that I contributed to his happiness along the way, but I'd be remiss if I did not actually thank you, Giselle, personally, for not only the happy life and the joy that you brought, but also for the beautiful, endlessly devoted care that you provided to Dad in his final time. Okay. You would do anything for him. You did do anything. You were truly a devoted wife, and I say completely in honesty, kol hakavod, which means all honor, should be bestowed upon you for your support. And you did it with cheer also, never complaining at all. And I also want to have a shout out to my father's caretaker, Samuel Choke Manan. Samuel, I apologize if I did not say your name properly. Samuel provided devoted care, kept my dad comfortable and well, and not an easy task because we all know how difficult doctors can be as patients. And my dad really gave Samuel kept him in shape and fighting shape. Throughout my married life, I've been very lucky to live only 15 minutes away from my dad and Giselle. My children's lives have been immeasurably enhanced by having them participate in nearly every single birthday, graduation, sporting event, school event, holiday celebration, every achievement, large and small, and that is a gift that they will always remember and cherish. My dad taught a lot of things, taught my kids a lot of things, or tried to encourage them. And there were so many tangible and intangible gifts. But I'd like to share something little on the light side. My kids will all acknowledge the fact that nobody taught them grammar like Granddad. And my dad would correct you in mid-sentence, be happy to expound on the various rules governing the usage of various parts of language, who and whom being a fond example. And it was a big family joke, but to tell you the truth, it left a lasting impression. I think that my 3 kids would definitely acknowledge the fact that they are as well spoken as they are, because Granddad actually made sure that they knew how to say things and write things properly. There are many family anecdotes that I could share, but I want to actually focus on the measure of the man that my dad was. And my dad would be so incredibly proud to have those military honors because he was so very patriotic. My dad was a member of the greatest generation, whose numbers are waning. And I've been doing some reading about who these people are. The greatest generation were the ones who were born, well, my dad was born in the late 20s, but that generation overcame war and economic depression so that they could give their descendants the opportunity for more freedom, education, and affluence. And these are the values that are attributed to this cohort of people. Personal responsibility, and please listen carefully to the list. Personal responsibility, integrity, humility, work ethic, service, commitment. I can think of no better way to describe my father. And in fact, my little hat to grammar, I'm going to actually take the literary license to make those nouns into adjectives where he is concerned, because that's exactly the way to describe him. My father was a man of few words. And in fact, if you had enough conversations with him, you would notice his charming habit of when he would speak, he often would not finish his sentences, and you were kind of left hanging like, what was that? Was that the end? What was that? Can you finish that sentence? And we used to laugh about that and say, Dad, wait, what was that? Come on, finish what you were saying. But for a man of few words, he was a man of poignant and memorable action. The qualities that stand out to me from the list that I read to you are commitment and generosity. And his generosity is legend in the family. And I've been warned over the last few days about by the texts and the comments from family members who spoke of how generous and my dad was and how he helped them in times of need. You never heard about this. There was never any fanfare. He did it quietly and made sure that the people he loved were helped and supported. While there are many stories in the family, and I look forward to hearing many more, I'd like to share with you 2 stories that perhaps only Ravana and I know about. The first story is something that I experienced myself, and this is the kindness to strangers, which my father exhibited. Back in, I think it was around 1990, through a crazy twist of circumstances, my father and Giselle had to cancel a vacation to Italy and Israel. And because I was able to at the time, it was Jonathan, my husband, who actually said, hey, you go to Israel with your father. Well, that was a crazy idea, but sure enough, we did it. And my father and I had a whirlwind trip to Israel together. One day, we went from north to south. It was constantly on the move. It was a wonderful, wonderful adventure, where, by the way, I was often mistaken for his young wife, but that's another story. We were visiting Taba, which at the time was, Taba is on the Gulf of Aqaba, that's the southern part of Israel. It's right near Eilat. But at the time, Taba was still part of Israel, and we visited right before Taba was actually given over in some type of agreement to Egypt. And we were at a seaside restaurant, beachside actually, eating a meal, paid the bill, and my father realized he didn't have enough money, coins, bills, to give a tip to the young server who had waited on us. Well, that was not going to happen, and we must have walked back, I don't know, half mile at least, it seems forever, and it was hot, it was either the hotel or the hotel lobby, wherever, so that he could break whatever bills he had, and then we walked all the way back, and he found that waiter because he wanted to make sure that that young man was compensated for the service that my father felt that he should be. And this left, I was an adult already, I had a child, and this left a very powerful impression on me about the generosity of this man. The other story I have is about, this was a cousin of my mother, my mother had extended family in Romania, a family we probably really didn't even know much about at all, and somehow a cousin tried to reach out to her, was successful. At the time, I think this was in the 70s, Jewish individuals had to buy their way out of the former Soviet Union. And it was not an easy task, and the levy was high. And my father, my mother really didn't even know this individual, but my father forked up the money, and it was sizable, to buy this family out and to actually enable them to make safe passage to Israel with their child. He subsequently also made a connection for this young man so that he could find a job. And when you think about that, he changed a life. He changed a family's life by his generosity. So I just want to conclude by reading a poem. I'm not really much of a poetry aficionado, but I found this and I thought it is so appropriate. The Measure of a Man. The measure of man is not determined by his show of outward strength, or the volume of his voice, or the thunder of his actions, or his intellect or academic abilities. It is seen rather in terms of the love that he has for his family and for everyone, the strength of his commitments, the genuineness of his friendships, the sincerity of his purpose, the quiet courage of his convictions, the fun, laughter, joy, and happiness he gives to his family and to others. His life, his love of life, his patience, and his honesty, and his contentment with what he has. And that was my dad. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sima, for that lovely and touching tribute about it.
So, because of life circumstances, I didn't get to spend as many hours with my father as I would have liked to. Early years and distance later on often kept us separated, but I like to think that my dad and I had the unique opportunity at points in life to choose each other and to choose to get to know each other. In particular, the years between when I was 15 and maybe 25, 27 years old were incredibly impactful to me, and the interactions I had with him in that decade, as well as those that followed, each left an indelible impression. He taught me so many lessons, and in his honor, I wanted to share with you some of those lessons. It shaped, in my mind, the man that he was, the person that I am, and I feel like we all can learn from the things that he shared. Like so many of the people here, it was my dad who taught me to talk about business and politics. And he did everything from subscribe to newspapers and magazines for me, to buy me books on esoteric aspects of business way before I was ready. He quizzed me on corporate events. He encouraged me, unfortunately unsuccessfully, to work on political campaigns. Our politics were often parallel, but they often were at odds as well. But it was my dad who taught me to agree to disagree with grace. That lesson stretched well beyond politics. He taught me to be the peacemaker in all things. That in life some things are more important than the fight, that relationships are the most important, and that giving in is not giving up. He told me to acquiesce with dignity. Being a woman of grace and dignity seemed important to him from the start. When I was young, I didn't really understand it, but my dad was a phenomenal teacher. He shared with me his love of classical music and opera, corrected my grammar, like Sema has spoken of. But he also did small things like help me find my signature scent, one that I still wear 35 years later. On one of my first outings with him as a teenager, he took great care not to embarrass me as he gently lifted my fork and knife from my hands, repositioned them, and told me to learn to eat like a lady, specifically to model myself after Europeans who he felt ate with such elegance as well as great efficiency. He always knew that I was into art, but it was him who introduced me to good design and showed me that there is a difference. He shared with me his thoughts about everything from clean lines and beautiful wood to capable carpenters. He admired the work that your dad did, Giselle. He taught me about beautiful fabrics, introduced me to the nuances of Missoni weaves and colors. He took me as a very awkward 20-year-old to Yves Saint Laurent and outfitted me like a businesswoman because that's what he convinced me to see. And then admitting that it didn't quite all fit yet, he took me to John's shop. On the way, waxing poetic about your skill and introducing me to great tailoring and to you. Few men knew how to shop like my dad, but I learned over time that it had nothing to do with the acquisition because, as you all know, much of the time he gave away what he acquired. As people have said, was a man of great generosity, it was legend. But I observed over time that it was not the buy. It was more about supporting the artist and the artist's skill. He had a really great appreciation for people who could make things and make them well. Dad was also there during my college years to help me find myself. He shared stories of many of his early jobs. I think everything from wringing chickens' necks to delivering newspapers and working in a classical record store. He taught me that each one of those jobs could make an impact on you as a person, and that giving your all 150% of the time was what you were required to do. I was frustrated, though. I didn't really know what direction to take. When I considered changing majors, he said to me, "Ravana, you don't become the person you're going to be for the rest of your life until you're in your mid to late 20s. And you won't have your greatest successes in life until just before you retire." And that's one of those most powerful lessons that he shared with me. It was so, so true. And now in my 50s, it motivates me more than ever. I pass that wisdom as often as I can onto young people, and it's one of the greatest gifts he gave me. But there were so many others. Like, love a good story, learn to tell a good story, and then tell it often and over again. Understand what goes on behind the scenes, whether it's football or movies or whatever you're interested in. Know how it's made and how it works. So be curious about the world, not fearful. Go out and see and visit and do as much as you can, no matter how far. He taught me that horses really are the most incredible of animals, and to admire someone who sits correctly in the saddle. That to get the cat to come over to you, all you have to do is sit on the couch and not care. That as much as you love something, remember that your life partner needs to love things too, to let them have hobbies and passions and dreams. That to heal is the highest calling, so that even if it's a Band-Aid on a boo-boo, do it with authority and care. That you will meet true brilliance rarely in your life, so that when you do, sit with it, be still, and listen. He shared with me so many of the stories of his most important mentors. He taught me to relax about religion, that it's personal, it's in your own heart, but be fiercely protective and outspoken of your heritage. And he taught me to respect your mother. Yes, he taught me that. There's one thing that really sticks, though, and that's that in life you shouldn't deal in extremes. At my most troublesome moments, I always hear my dad saying, "Ravana, Nothing is ever going to be as bad as you imagine, and neither as good as you dream. It will always be something in between, but it will be okay. No matter what it was, he was all in. So whether it was tennis, skiing, cooking, business, being a mother, one had to be completely outfitted and thoroughly researched. And when I expressed an interest in being an ad copywriter, Dad gave me an entire library on the English language. He loved William Sapphire's puns, and I love looking at those books to this day. But when I ultimately switched to strategy, he did too, and the library evolved. He just wanted me to feel confident. He wanted Sima to feel confident, and like we belonged. I hope he knew that it wasn't the things that we appreciated most, but instead his sincere belief in us. Dad didn't flinch when I left Philly to oddly go be with another scuba diving car admiring, football watching, music loving radiologist. You might wonder why. He only proudly spoke of the generations of doctors in his family and treated Kevin like a son, and more important than that, like a person of incredible respect. They shared a lot of cases way late into my dad's life, talking about new technologies and patients, and I know he greatly enjoyed those conversations. And I'm sorry, Kevin, I know that you're supposed to remember your husband's face on your wedding day when he first sees you, but my dad's face just is what is indelibly impressed in my mind. Oh, and the fact that before I walked down the aisle, he looked at me very seriously and said, "Shouldn't you put your veil down now?" And as I was momentarily confused and then realized what he was trying to say and adjusted my veil over my head, it was my turn to go down the aisle, and kind of chuckling and smiling, I stepped into a new life. And I think that's an important lesson too, that whatever life sends you when you step into a new era, go into it with a positive attitude, a smile, and even a little laughter. So living 1,200 miles away meant that we weren't always going to see each other day to day, but his willingness to let me live my life was just another example of his unconditional and selfless love. I always tell people that my memories of my dad as a young child are sometimes confusing and all mixed up, but I know with 100% certainty that he was the most awesome father as an adult and an incredible granddad. The last time I saw my dad, he dozed off and on, and at one point he woke, hopefully from a pleasant dream, and he asked me very seriously, "When are we getting on the train to Miami?" which was always there. When was it leaving? And I asked him if he would like to go. He nodded and smiled. So, Dad, I hope that somehow you're on your way, that you've donned that navy vintage jacket that you always told me you admired, that you hopped into a 1966 Mustang, rolled down the windows, maybe you're stopping for a good hot dog on the way, and then with the wind in your hair, you're on the way to surf and sunshine. I live in Florida, but I'll never quite be a Florida girl. You can't take the Philly out. But I think now that beaches will hold a little bit more meaning for me. I think now when I stare at the sun and the sand and the surf, that I'll look for my dad and think of him, gloriously tanned, sitting under a palm tree, good Cuban cigar, and nice, serious cocktail in hand. A beautiful aria playing in the background. I love you, Dad.
Thank you, Ravana. That was beautiful. We'll call him grandson here.
Friends and family from near and far, thank you so much for coming to mark such a somber and just really sad occasion. This is not how I'd hope to spend a Friday afternoon, but I'm grateful for your support, and I know my family appreciates it as well. My grandfather, Dr. Eugene Cohen, was truly the best grandfather the honor of a lifetime to be his grandson, and I really truly mean that. There's so much I will remember about my granddad and the time that I got to spend with him. From watching sports like baseball and football on TV, to celebrating holidays like Passover, Thanksgiving, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, going out to dinner at Sal and Joe's, the Ponzios, talking politics and current events with him, and everything in between, including, yes, him correcting my grammar from time to time. I enjoyed every last moment that I had with him. One moment that stands out in particular, which was seeing him at my bar mitzvah, so proud of me, and that was not just about me that I mentioned that. It's because I was happy to see that I made him so happy. He always enjoyed traveling. He was able to go to Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and so many other places. Beyond the time I spent with him, what I most admired about my grandfather was his dedication and his love of country. Fighting to help protect and defend the country he loved. Eventually, he became a radiologist, devoting his life to help people, and there could truly be nothing more admirable. My grandfather's first concern was never about him, it was always about you. What can I do for you? How can I help you? What can I get you? So how am I doing now that my grandfather is no longer physically with me? I'm going to be honest, these last few days have been very hard to cope. But as a great man would say, I'm surviving. Thank you.
A beautiful tribute there. And finally, we'll call on Eugene.
Well, everything has been said before me. There's not too much left. And I haven't prepared anything. I didn't have time to write anything down. So it'll be off the cuff. Sorry about that. So basically, I met Gene when I was 32 years old. I was working as a volunteer at the Garden State Hospital, where he worked afterwards many years. And I was introduced by my friend Sandy, who's here. And as somebody said, he asked her, he would like to go to opera and doesn't have anybody to go with him. And she said she has a friend who likes opera. And she introduced us, and we went from there on. We played tennis. And we basically loved traveling. We traveled to Europe, a lot of places. He loved the cities. He did not share my enthusiasm for nature and walks and flowers and things like that. He liked cities. So we did most of the cities in Europe and other places. Then eventually we learned how to scuba dive, which was really the most beautiful thing we have ever done, and I would recommend it to anybody young. We went underwater, and true to his nature, I was taking photos, and of course I didn't know where I was going. I was too interested in what I was seeing. I was taking photos, macro and everything. And you're not supposed to go, you're supposed to go down deep, and then every time after that go up. You cannot bounce, because your body cannot take that. So he was watching me, and I was always late. I was always behind because taking photos. He was always watching that I would follow the group, I wouldn't get lost. So he was just watching the whole time. I don't think he had much fun. He was just watching me the whole time, trying to make sure I don't get lost. So that was a kind of another type of generosity that you pointed out. So we had a great time scuba diving, and we played tennis in those days. basically, as I said, from what I gather from his past, he was a great doctor. He cared about his patients. He was a GP first, so he had to visit people at home anytime. I have a funny story about that. He had a family that he was looking after, the old mother, the grandmother, and they called him to come to see her, and he said, he's sick, he can't come. So guess what? The son comes to the door and knocks on the door to check up on him. If he hadn't been sick, that would have been a problem. He was sick. This is the kind of family that would have taken measures, punish him. So basically, he was sick, so he got away with it. That's the kind of person, he would have gone if he could. So anyway, he was always devoted to his patients, and he became a radiologist, but he never lost the interest in the personal aspect of his patients. So basically, I am happy that we had a good family. I'm very close to Zimmer and family that live close by, Jonathan Zimmer, Aaron and Shira, and it's like my kids because we saw them grow up. I have photos of little babies and bigger and bigger and bigger. We went to every birthday and every event that had to do with them. So I was since I don't have any children myself, I was very happy to be involved in their lives. This is like almost like my children too, like an aunt, grandmother, whatever. So I was happy about that, and we kept in touch, even though they moved away. We kept in touch and called, and then with Rivana, we went to Florida many times because his sister and husband also lives there in that area. So we always went to Florida to visit, and many times we went to visit Rivana there too, and had a good time. We went to every occasion that Zimmer had, religious, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, whatever religious services, meals. We went to her. I'm always happy for free food. Well cooked, well done. Gene was not a great eater. He didn't eat very much, and he was kind of really fussy. He liked sandwiches, meat sandwiches, which I could never eat myself. So basically, most of the time I cooked for myself, and if he wanted some of my spaghetti, he could have them, but I didn't cook for him because he didn't really have the same. My taste is German cooking. My mother cooked German, so I make potatoes and vegetables and some meat. I don't know, basic cooking, and he wasn't interested in that. So anyway, he managed to survive on this non-diet, non-diet or non-cooking. I don't know what he ate. Sandwiches, whatever. So anyway, basically this is the last. I just want to get to the last couple of years. He was declining. He had diabetes. He had a pacemaker. He had AFib, irregular heartbeat. He lived with that for many years. He managed to live with that for many years, and basically we did manage the last 3 years ago. I think we went 3 weeks to Japan, our last major vacation. And I must admire him for that because all his life, since he was a patriot, he did not like Japan. He did not, because they bombed Pearl Harbor. So he did not really want to have anything to do with Japan. He was the enemy, basically. So, but in the last couple of years, he must have changed his mind because he said he wants to go to Japan. So I booked a trip with a company from Canada. Everything, like the driver waits at the airport, takes us to a hotel. Next day, the driver comes and picks us up sightseeing. I mean, the whole thing. He was in a wheelchair now. He couldn't walk too much, so everything was done with the driver guide. Wheelchair everywhere. And in Japan, you travel by train. You don't drive that much. So we went on a train from one place to another. The train stops only 1 minute, so we have to kind of get on it. And when we got to the next station, the next guide was there with a wheelchair. She knew where we were sitting because she had the number of our seats. So she was waiting for us, pick us up. So everything was done for us, and he really had a great time. We went all over the place. We went to Mount Fuji, we went to Kyoto, we went to Hiroshima, and Hiroshima was for him, was for us, very painful because, as I said, since he always considered Japan kind of the enemy, to see what they had suffered, and went to the H-bomb museum. to see what these people had suffered and to hear people talking about what happened, we were really upset. We really suffered there. But anyway, we had a very good time, and it was our last great vacation. 2 years ago, we had a cancer of the colon, and we went to Pennsylvania Hospital to have it taken out. And after that, I don't know if it's the anesthesia or the operation, but he didn't eat anymore. He could not eat any. Something was switched off up here in the brain. No appetite, no hunger. So we went back and had a tube put in his stomach, a G-tube. So he was fed with liquid at night. We filled up, so the bag was liquid, and that's how he was fed for the last year and a half. And then we survived, and we were supposed to go that summer to take a cruise on the Mississippi with my girlfriend Eileen from France. We had booked a tour, a boat tour from New Orleans to Memphis, but of course we had to cancel. But we tried to make a life with his problems. In October he was in the hospital 3 times, and in one of them he got COVID. So, and then he was 11 days in the next hospital, and I couldn't see him, and that was very hard. But he got home, and things were kind of okay, but he didn't have any more strength. He couldn't walk anymore. So I would just want to say my husband was a very, I've already said that, very good person, generous, loving his family. He loved his family. And every night I showed him the photos of Ethan, Shira's baby, every night on his, what do you call that thing? Huh? Tiny beans. Tiny beans. Every night I showed them last photos of the day. I mean, that kid must be a model now. Will be a model one day. Every night I showed photos of Ethan, and he was before he's kind of sleepy when I started. And as soon as I showed him Ethan, he perked up and he was laughing and enjoying that. That was his treat of the night. And I wanted him to go to bed with a good feeling, and that was the good feeling he got from Ethan. So thank you for having Ethan and sharing him with us, because that was the last joys he had in his life, and he will be very much missed. I cannot still understand it. I won't see him again. I can't. It doesn't penetrate. Thank you for coming. How was that for off the cuff?
It was excellent.
Could have done it better if I wouldn't have done. I'm sorry, I'm not worried. I'm sorry, I'm not worried. Sorry about that. I'm a hack. You know, I'm a hack. Sorry about that.
Thank you all for sharing so deeply and movingly with all of us. At this time, I'm going to ask that you please rise for the memorial prayers. El Male Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Shchina, B'malos Kedoshim Adorim Kezora Kiamasirim, and Nishmat Yoel ben Yitzchak HaKohen B'Rivka She'alach Le'olamo. Began Eden Tehim Menuchato L'chein Baal Rachamim Aster Episeter Konfech Le'olamim, Utzror Tzrechem Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato V'Enoch HaMishkavo V'Namar Amen. May God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace under the wings of His sheltering presence to the beautiful soul of Eugene Cohen, who has gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds he performed as he graced this, the land of the living. May his soul thus be bound in the bond of life eternal. May he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. And we'll conclude with the mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divara chirute, v'amlich malchute, b'chayichon v'yomeichon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv yimeru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Levarach, Leolam Umaya. Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal. Shemei Dekudasha B'rechu. Ve'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechemata. Da'miran bi'alma v'yimeru amein. Yehi Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru amein. Oseh shalom b'mrama. Yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru amein. To all who mourn we say, Hamakom Yinachem Etchem B'tov Shar Avelei Tzion Yerushalayim. We pray that God will comfort you along with all other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And together we say, Amen. You may be seated, please.
May we have the pallbearers, please. But ask you to rise once more, please.
Yoshe B'Seiter Elyon, B'Tzel Shaddai Lona, Umar Ladonai, Machzir B'Tzudakti, Elohai Achakbo. Kihu Yatzilcha Mipakya Kush Midever Chavod, Bereto Yasaf Lach B'Tacha Kenafet Kefse. Tzina B'Sochara Amito, Lo Tira Mipacha, Laila V'Kichu, Kramam, Yitevo Bofu Yahaloch, Miketer Yishvi Tzoharayim. Kipo Mitzidcha Elef, Ruva Minech Elech Alo Yigash. Rak beinech tabi b'risholei rishim tireh. Ki et Adonai v'asirion santanu necha lo tu'neh elech hara'a v'nega lo yichrav olecha v'arehu b'il. Yikra'eni v'yavo anochi b'tzarach abseyo v'chabdeo orechim aspiyeo v'arehu b'shuati orechim aspiyeo v'arehu b'shuati.
Will be seated, please.